You know what? I have first now realized that KKK is in the movie title. I mean, it should be obvious. It's just BlackKKlansman with the big three Ks there. But when you saw it in the cinema, it was big black, then a small K, and then big Klansman. And I didn't give it any more thought. So maybe I'm just slow. Hello, brothers and sisters. My name is Daidarius, and welcome to the view of BlackKKlansman. That's a tongue twister. Let me say that. But yeah, welcome to the review. So BlackKKlansman, or the movie, it takes place in, I believe, it's the mid 70s. I'm not entirely sure because I don't remember they stating that, but I'm pretty sure it's the mid 70s. For once, it's how people speak, and two, so many afros. I mean, it's the only hairdo people knew about. So I'm pretty sure it takes place during the 1970s. We then follow this apparently real story about Ron Stallworth, who became the first black cop in his jurisdiction, and then he infiltrated the KKK, even though he is a black person, and then gained some information, and he used a buddy of his, a colleague of him, as the face of his persona that he created, so that he himself will be talking with them over the phone, and then his colleague will be the face when they go and meet up. And that is pretty much the movie. It is a quite simple premise, and yeah, I don't think I can add any more to it. So, the review. So first off, this movie's introduction is a bit of a quirky and a bit of unnecessary, but I understand why. You start with seeing Ron becoming a police officer, and he then gets transferred to the archives, and he doesn't like being in the archive because he doesn't feel like he can fulfill his true potential, which is fine because that gives us some kind of character development. I get that. He then gets on his first undercover assignment, and here he becomes kind of addicted to the premise of going undercover and discovering things. And the scene where he goes undercover is a mixed bag. On one side, you can see this kind of genius way of portraying a person in power who speaks to the audience, and then some specific part of the speech then resonates with the audience. And the way he does it is that he just blacks out the whole screen and then just fades in that's one person's reaction to it. It works surprisingly well, and I must say that scene in itself is quite powerful. However, it goes on for too long, and it only sets off a little bit of the plot, and that is it. It doesn't really expand our character that much, and it doesn't really provide too much for the story, and that's a problem I will get into later on. After that, he becomes a detective when he finds a way into the KKK, and this is where the movie is his biggest strength, and it's actually quite hard to review this movie, but I will save that for the cons of this movie. So Ron's interaction with his colleague, especially those who he goes undercover in the KKK with, their interactions works extremely well. They feel like real characters will act and react, and there is some comedy thrown into there, and just the way that they implement the race aspect of it with Ron is just tastefully done. And what I mean by that is that this movie could have presented one side, pushed one agenda of this race diversion agenda where we divide people by race, but for the most part it doesn't do it. It shows you the information that we know about the KKK, how they want to apparently murder and just eradicate all black or just colored people overall. If you're not Caucasian and Christian, then you must be exterminated. That's how the movie presents it. And I know that we can't just say that all KKK members are like that, but as you know, there's a reason that stereotype exists. On the other hand, you see the Black Panther community, and they just want to get rid of all the cop pigs, I believe they call them, and just the white or Caucasian people overall, because those two are part of the system that oppresses them, and they don't mind that those people end up being killed. So you have two opposing forces that has basically the same ideology and they want the same thing. The only thing is that it will bring a lot of hurt and destruction to everyone else caught in the middle. You can't have one triumphant over the other. We need to have equality. We need to stop focusing on the race part and start focusing on the people part, the person part. Who are you as a person? That is kind of the vibe the movie is going for, but it is hidden under so much agenda about this political view, and especially at the end. No, it's not. It's not the complaints yet. Now, another thing I like about this movie is the main character. Now, you don't really get to know him as a person, but what I do like is that it gives him some small quirks that makes him feel real. For example, he loves his afro, and he loves it a lot. And I understand why, because it's a pretty smooth afro. I mean, I can't get one, so I'm a bit jealous. But every time he's doing something, getting up after lying down or just getting out of a car or entering a new room, every time he has to make sure that his afro is still, well adjusted. So every time, every scene you see him starting with, right there, it's okay. It's just a minor detail, but it shows that he wants to be in control of things and tries to shape things his way, which he kind of does with this KKK undercover mission. There's also Adam Driver, who plays Flip, who is the face of their persona, is this guy. He was Kylo Ren in the new Star Wars trilogy. He also is an extremely complex, I will say, character, because like Ron, who has to play a white Caucasian guy who is extremely racist and just dismiss his entire race, the same goes for Flip, because he is a Jew and he needs to act like Jew is the spawn of Satan all the time. So he has to abandon that heritage. And the funny thing is, the man hasn't been raised in the Jewish faith at all. It is just his heritage, and he has never thought about faith and just all the Jewish tradition until he had to sit across of a KKK man and then just diminish everything about his history. And I like that approach because it makes the characters more complex and more relatable. But even though that they're pretty cold in their undercover personas and doesn't crack under pressure, you just get a glimpse that these things affect them. I also like the cinematography of this movie because it is shot, pretty basic, but it works and doesn't go too crazy with the 70s feel. What I mean by that is trying to replicate how we shot movies and just TV shows in general in the 70s. No, it takes a modern look at the 70s and just keep everything else down to earth. Now at this point, I am running out of good things to say about this movie. Well, I will say that the movie in all has a decent pacing and you aren't bored while watching it. Yes, that's it. So the gripes. First of all, the introduction is kind of wasted because even though that it pretty much sets up our main character, it could have been done better because again, our main character is kind of a blank slate. We don't really know how he feels about the modern society or the 70s society with this race diversion. And yes, he does sometimes explain how he feels about it, but you never see him react to the things around him. Not at all. And then there is the fact that this movie just pushes on its view on what's right and what's wrong instead of just leave it up to you, the viewer. It becomes extremely thrown in your face at the end of the movie where it shows footage from the last year demonstration where there was a car who just ran into these facets and Black Lives Matter group, and it just piles on and on and on about how the white supremacists are the bad guys, and it doesn't do anything against the opposition extremists who are also, if you be reasonable about it, is a bad guy, because the right and the left are both wrong. As I mentioned earlier in the review, we need to stop focusing on the race part and then focus on the person part. But this movie just becomes too political for its own good at the end. And I don't really know what more I can say about it, just that it's left me with a bad taste in my mouth and it wasn't the movie's point, which I'll get back to in a minute. The other thing is that this movie doesn't really know what it wants to do. Does it want to show you how bad it is with the segregation part? in the 70s and now still is a ratio nowadays, and we haven't changed one bit, doesn't want to see you, a young black man, oppose the system by following its rules and then come out victorious at the end? Or does it just want to show you how bizarre these opposing ideologies, who are basically the same if you think about it, are? The movie doesn't know, and it ends up using too much of scenes which only purpose is to make you feel bad about what's happening. And what I mean is, there's a scene that tells a apparently true story about just after when Birth of the Nation came out, where a black kid got brutally murdered. The only reason it's there is just to make you hate the KKK more, because you needed more reasons to. It doesn't provide anything new to the table. It doesn't provide any new information. It doesn't complement the plot in any way, and it's just there. It has no purpose except that it sets up the climax of the movie, kind of, but not really. And I just think that this is the wrong movie to put this scene in when you consider everything that came before tone-wise. There's also the investigation that's there during. You don't really see where it's going or what's the point of it, except that now they have information on the KKK, which I guess is always a win, but still, you don't know why they're doing it. They just go with, well, we now have a mole in the KKK, so let's call it a day. We call it a day. Cool. See ya. They have no argument for why the police needs to throw a lot of resources at this case and even risk the lives of one of their policemen. They don't really explain that. Then there's the fact that this whole case doesn't get resolved. And I know that apparently this is based on the memoirs of the real Ron Stallworth, but still, even though you do an adaptation, you still need to make sure that the main focus, the main point of your movie has a resolution. It might not be a satisfying one, but it needs a resolution. There needs to be a point for that plot to exist. Otherwise, why are you making your movie? And again, I know that this movie maybe want to just stir up the fact that America hasn't really progressed since the 70s, considering the race issue. But still then, it doesn't really manage to do anything at all. The characters are the same in the end as they were in the beginning. The threat levels are the same at the end as they were at the beginning. There was nothing really useful that came from the investigation. And when you get to the end, you find out that the investigation managed to do zip. There's no reason for them to investigate. Nothing comes out of this movie. You have learned or experienced nothing from when you sat down and watched this movie until you came to the end. The only thing this movie has going for it is the character interaction, and that some of the scenes during the investigation can be a bit suspenseful, but they don't play it up as suspenseful, so you're just sitting there and watching a guy trying to talk his way out of being actually murdered. So when you know they have a movie that has some decent characters with good interaction between each other and has a nice way to tell a story, but is in the end utterly pointless and is just trying to force too much of its own political view onto you, especially at the end. And when you consider that there's only a few scenes throughout the movie that does this, it just feels off and unwarranted. And I have a feeling that this movie thinks it's asking some huge questions and trying to mark some lands in this issue, but in the end it accomplishes nothing, and it does nothing for the viewer, it does nothing for the subject, it just does nothing. So in the end, do you need to see this movie? Not really. There's a lot more greater movies out there which tackles this subject better and actually has a purpose to exist, where this just really doesn't. So I will say that the BlackKKlansman, you should catch it on Netflix. My experience. Yeah, I got nothing additional to say to that. This movie was a bit of a bummer, especially considering then you can feel that a lot of talents were put into this movie. They just had nothing to work with, which is a bummer, because I think that the bizarre concept of a black man infiltrating the KKK could have been a marvelous movie, either a great comedy or a suspenseful thriller, or could maybe also progress the whole issue about race segregation, but it accomplishes none of that, which kind of bums me out, because I had high hopes for what this movie could have been. That's just me. Anyway, the BlackKKlansman Have you seen it? What did you think about it? And what is your favorite race issue movie? Race fixated issue. How should I say this? What is your favorite movie that deals with race or discrimination? Whatever you think, comment below and make your thoughts. And as always, until I see you in the next video, remember to stay awesome. Bye! So, if I was Kylo Ren going undercover, I think I'd just slaughter them all.